not gonna lie to y'all. They could not drop me off in the middle of China speaking Mandarin. They could not. They could not, because I'm going to just cuss everybody out who asked me dumb. I'm not going to hold you. And the crazy thing about it is, like, people be sitting around here trying to police how black people should react to other people asking them stupid ass questions. Like, why are you asking me, whether my blood is red or not because my skin is dark?
So I've only been to China once, to the city of Beijing, and I can't lie, I had a decent time.
There is no such thing as a minority in this country. Do not believe the U.S. Census. Every number that you see, every ingredient, seasoning, everything that you see is manipulated to make you believe you are less.
I'm a black woman, and I'm proud of it.
I hope that what people are seeing is that it's a possibility to be more than one type of black woman.
Hi. Let's establish a few rules for this video. We're going to be honest with each other, okay? We're not going to generalize. Instead, we're going to use qualifying language such as some, many, most, possibly, in my experience, or in my opinion. We're also not going to catch a case of whataboutism. This video is about apples and apples only, so don't start commenting, what about strawberries? Cool? Okay, cool. Oh, and there will be historical discourse that may upset you. Don't shoot the messenger. Links to sources are always in the description.
The truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. Hey!
I'm not African, nor am I African American. I'm black, I'm Black American. Now, before you think this is something it isn't,
all these talks, I'm trash. Let me cook.
I didn't always feel the need to identify as Black American instead of African American. I really didn't care either way. But living in China changed that. This delineation is not about division. It's about recognizing and appreciating our unique histories, differences, and shared experiences.
I feel like a lot of Africans don't understand the African American experience. I never knew until I came here and started learning the history of what happened here. Like all the way from the end of slavery, Jim Crow laws, redlining, the civil rights movement, the pipeline from the school to prison pipeline.
The prison industrial complex.
Yeah, like all of this stuff. I don't think Africans have an idea of all these things that are put against African Americans to become successful. Like even the Africans that are brought here, we're brought and we're put into like nicer neighborhoods. White people are nicer to Africans than African Americans.
So how did China change my perspective? And from my experience as a 5-year resident who traveled to 15 Chinese provinces, I'm finally going to answer a question I've been asked time and time again. How was my experience as a Black woman, and how do Chinese people really feel about Black people? I'm Jessica, and you've reached the destination.
All the Caucasians to the back. Immediately. Honestly, thank you. Looks better already.
Just kidding, Caucasians, you can stay, but just know that the target audience for this video is the entire Black and African diaspora and Chinese netizens across the globe. These two groups have a long history together, one of admiration and solidarity.
The Shogun of Harlem.
But also misunderstandings and tension. So when Xiaohongshu got popping with Americans, it's no wonder so many Black Americans use the app to ask, how do Chinese feel about Black people? They've seen countless stories of mistreatment, discrimination, and false imprisonment.
American athletes and Chinese justice. It was nearly 8 months ago that 3 UCLA freshman basketball players, including LiAngelo Ball, were detained for 6 days in China. The players' case attracted international headlines, the attention of the U.S. government, including that of President Trump. Now, by contrast, the case of Wendell Brown is very different. Virtually no one knows of this former Ball State and CFL football player. He was arrested in a bar fight in
Chongqing, the city I lived in.
20 months ago. Brown has been in jail ever since, still awaiting a verdict from his trial, which was last year.
They've watched shocking videos like that one of the girls on the train in rural China, or they've seen this infamous detergent ad. At the same time, they've also seen Black American and African content creators sharing positive experiences about life in China. So of course they're confused. But let's be for real. Do you really think you're going to get an honest answer on a Chinese social media platform that is now flooded with people from all over the world? The question itself is flawed. How do all Chinese people feel about all Black people? Is that what you're asking? Yes, China is a homogenous country, but people still have their own beliefs shaped by their individual experiences. By homogenous, I mean Chinese people generalize themselves. They often say things as if they apply to all Chinese people. One of my favorites from living there is Chinese people don't have allergies and we have steel stomachs. We can eat anything. I have a couple of food intolerances, so I would get this a lot. If you ever take a stroll through the comment section in one of my videos about China, you'll also see this reflected there. Chinese people themselves stating what all 1.4 billion of them do or don't do. Someone who studied abroad for 5 years is going to see things very differently from someone who never left their province. There's so much nuance here, but I'm gonna do my best to break it down. Let's flip the question. How do Black people feel about Chinese? Because if I didn't know any better, if I wasn't Black myself, or if I had a very limited view, I might think Black people hate all Asians based on the way media covered violence against them during the pandemic. I was in China horrified watching images of Asians being attacked in the US. I knew that all the assailants weren't Black, but those are the clips that they showed over and over and over again. So when people in China started crossing the street when they saw me or pulling their kids away from my direction in fear, I knew exactly why. They had seen the same media I had. Or they thought I had COVID. Look, things were weird in China too. And for some reason, they kind of flipped the narrative and made it seem like white and foreigners were the cause of COVID in China. Super weird. Everybody knew that if you were in China during that time, you hadn't been anywhere because the borders were closed. Take a look at the bottom right headline, "We Need Help, Coronavirus Fuels Racism Against Black Americans in China." The Trump administration's response to harassment of African Americans has been muted. Yeah, because Trump only helps people who are rich and or famous. To this day, I still get hateful comments from Chinese expats in the US, not American-born Chinese, but people who moved here for work or school. They've had negative experiences with Black Americans, so now they project that onto every Black American they see on or offline. Here's a recent example from the comment section in one of my videos. "I bet if I was in your caves in America, you will beat me into a pulp. You will have shown your true personality." My response, "I don't know who hurt you, but I hope you heal." The response to that was, "By working in the inner cities in the Northeast, dealing with you people for 30 years. You people can only hurt the weak. Who are kidding?" One of the most endearing things I've learned about Chinese culture that is very different from Americans is that Chinese people tend to apologize for the poor behavior of other Chinese. I appreciate the energy every time, but the awful actions of a few Chinese people don't reflect on all Chinese people. Just like Black Americans who disrespect Asians are not a reflection of me. I hope we all can extend each other that grace. Most Americans in general do not internalize the actions of other Americans. With all the atrocities that Americans have committed, how could we even function if we did? Imagine if every time you saw an angry-looking white man, you thought he might commit a mass shooting. Some Americans might actually think that way because statistically, that is the demographic most likely to commit a mass shooting. But that's not the narrative that we've been force-fed for centuries.
Studied abroad at HBCU, Historically Black Colleges Universities in Virginia. Of course, most of the students are Black students. and I was the only Asian there. And the experience was really fun. But when I talk about this to Japanese people, a lot of Japanese people ask me a same question. That was, all black college, isn't it dangerous? I know it sounds racist somehow, but it's very normal reaction of Japanese people who are not familiar with American culture. So I didn't want to change it. So I always answer, no, it was very safe because there was no white people.
Some Chinese genuinely believe that a black person might reach out and hit them if they're angry. I've seen this expressed online in both countries, and that is by design. It's media programming meant to keep us at odds. The trope that black people are violent and angry has been pushed over and over again for hundreds of years. Despite the fact that if that were true, in my opinion, the colonization of Africa would not be as widespread as it is, and the US certainly would not look the way it does today.
Peaceful protests get nothing. There is nothing that comes from being peaceful. Peaceful does not land anywhere in history. And we can see that with how the inception of this country, America, was created. Colonizers for centuries have been using violence to dominate, overcome, and take whatever they want. We are not colonizers. There is no such thing as a minority in this country. Do not believe the U.S. Census. Every number that you see, every ingredient, seasoning, everything that you see is manipulated to make you believe you are less.
And the answer is because America has always known what you are. America has always known who you are. America has understood what you're capable of, and they will make you think you ain't nothing at the same time that they exploit your gifts. They'll tell you lazy and make you a slave. They'll tell you you dirty and have you clean their house. They'll tell you uncivilized, and we raise their children. They know who you are.
If more Black and Chinese people understood how deeply our histories parallel each other, we'd start breaking down the divisions, rejecting the false narratives, and pushing back against the systems that have kept us side-eyeing each other for generations.
Criminal offensive side-eye.
Between 1932 and 1945, Japanese doctors carried out horrific experiments on Chinese civilians during wartime.
You might have seen on Rednote that some comment, "Do not mistake us with Japanese. I will show you the crimes that Japan has concealed from the world." I assure you that the content is absolutely true. Before we begin, I need to warn you that the following content is graphic. I will show you several human experiments conducted by Unit 731. In Unit 731, they referred to Chinese people as maruta, which means logs. They could do anything to them in experiments. Steam experiment. Do you know how the human body's 78% water content was calculated? It was through live experiments where they placed victims in high temperature environments until their body moisture evaporated completely, thus determining the body's water content. Freeze experiment. They took victims outside, in temperatures below -30 degrees Celsius, ordered them to roll up their sleeves and pants, and then used cold water, warm water, and boiling water to thaw the frostbitten areas for research. After pouring boiling water on the frostbitten parts, flesh and bones would immediately separate. Barometric pressure experiment. To test the human body's tolerance to low pressure, they would lock live people in a sealed space and then slowly remove the air, reducing the pressure inside until the body explodes. Maternal love experiment. This is one of the most notorious experiments. They would strip a mother and her child naked and lock them in a special room, then heat the floor to see if the mother would step on her baby to make herself feel better. This is a photo of human skin. The people in the photo were a family of 3. Their skin was peeled off alive without any anesthesia. The perpetrator of these atrocities was Shiro Ishii, and this motherfucker escaped justice.
Between 1932 and 1972, the U.S. Public Health Service left 399 Black American men purposely infected with syphilis, even after the cure, penicillin, became widely available. In a different testing group, U.S. doctors infected healthy people with syphilis. In other groups, they injected them with hepatitis and even cancer cells. In 1951, the cancer cells of a Black woman named Henrietta Lacks were taken without her consent. Those cells led to tons of medical breakthroughs, including the development of the polio vaccine. But neither she nor her family ever gave permission, nor did they receive compensation. Black women have historically been used for medical experimentation and disregarded when we speak up about our healthcare. Even today, in 2025, Black women in the US still have the highest maternal mortality rates. While the rate for white and Hispanic women has dropped, for Black women, it has actually increased. Black people have faced cruelty and dehumanization since our ancestors were forced from Africa. So when you tell a Black American woman who knows her history that Chinese people are just staring because they've never seen a Black person before, or they're just taking a photo because they think she's beautiful, or that them pointing and laughing as she walks by is harmless, remember the following story.
Georges Cuvier is celebrated as the father of paleontology, the study of fossils, and is revered as one of the finest minds in history. But a lesser-known part of his legacy involves his encounter with Sarah Baartman, a Black South African woman and member of the Khoikhoi tribe who was born in 1789.
She had sort of a tragic childhood. Her parents died very young. She married very young. She had children that also died while they were babies.
In October of 1810, at the age of 20, Baartman, who didn't understand what she had consented to, was trafficked to Europe by a British officer who promised her she would appear in theatrical shows. Upon arrival, Baartman was sexually exploited and derisively named Hottentot Venus by her new owners, who publicly exposed her naked body in a cage alongside animals to paying customers.
She was put on display naked because people were very intrigued by her Black body, that she had sort of proportions that we think are normal for Black women. And so they put her on display, like along with circus animals, so that people could sexually assault her and touch her and exploit her. And white men profited off of that, and they made money until the day that she died.
Powerful men like Cuvier paid money for private demonstrations in their homes where they would sexually exploit her. Cuvier then turned Baartman into his own personal science experiment.
Guess what? The earliest known Chinese woman to migrate to the US, a Feng Moi, arrived in New York from Guangzhou in 1834. She had bound feet and was literally put on display by traders, or as we call them today, human traffickers, Nathaniel and Frederick Carn, then later by the P.T. Barnum, the circus promoter. Yes, that circus. It's interesting that unlike Sarah Baartman, I didn't come across any nude images of the Chinese lady. I did find that in the early days of Chinese immigration in the US, Chinese women were considered promiscuous. This is a stereotype that Black women have battled historically and still persists today.
Just another day on uni. Welcome uni.
It's funny at first. You have this Black woman who's daring this woman to put her hands on her. You have this Chinese woman who is calling her stupid. They're on a city bus in San Francisco. I think this was probably about 14 or 15 years ago. Without context, all of the context that I've just given you, this is funny. But with all of the context that we know now, all I see are two women who are having a really bad day and completely oblivious about how much they probably have in common. I'm gonna cut it off right there. I really don't feel the need to show the rest of that video, but if you want to see it, the link is in the description. If everything I've shared thus far is not enough of a connection between our histories, here's a really spicy one. According to legal scholar Ian Haney Lopez, author of the book White by Law, which is right there, Chinese people were once characterized as Black in the US. Yeah, you heard me. Chinese people were characterized as Black in the US. For over 100 years, U.S. federal laws restricted immigration based on the completely made-up concept of race. They kept shifting the definition of white. Irish, Germans, today, they're considered white, but back then, not so much. The two groups they were always sure about, though, Asians and people of African descent. Definitely not white. The so-called founders of America dragged African people here in the 1600s, forced them to build their homes, plant and harvest their crops, and raise their children. But they still refused to consider them fully human, let alone citizens. In the 1850s, when Chinese immigrants started to arrive of their own free will, searching for gold in California or escaping the aftermath of the Opium Wars, the US government decided, no, this is getting out of hand. So they passed laws to keep Chinese people out. Never mind the fact that Chinese laborers literally built the railroads in this country that still exists today, playing a critical role in America's infrastructure. In 1875, the Page Act, designed to prohibit immigrants deemed undesirable, defined as Chinese laborers or prostitutes, from entering the US, was enacted. 7 years later, in 1882, Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act. Initially, it was meant to be a 10-year ban on all Chinese immigrants, but they kept extending it. By 1917, they expanded it to all Asians. And would you lo and behold, during that same time period, the Senate tried to pass a bill to exclude all members of the Black or African race. 300 years in the country at that time, and they still tried it. The only reason it didn't pass was because the NAACP lobbied hard to shut it down. This is what we mean when we say, "Oh, my life, I had to fight." The reason that's even more crazy is because before they could even start banning immigrants who were not the right type of white, they had to deal with all of the Chinese and Black people who were already here. In 1870, the Naturalization Act was extended to people of African descent, as it should have been since there were so many of us here. So that whole attempt to ban Black people was their attempt to reverse laws that were already in place. What a coinky-dink. That's exactly the same thing that's happening right now in the US. 100 years later. Back in the 1800s, the legal concept of race was so messy. So when Chinese immigrants who were already in the US applied for citizenship, it would have been easier for them if they argued that they were of African nativity or descent, because that's the language the law used back then instead of Black or colored. Legally, according to the man who wrote the book on it, they could have done that.
Everybody wouldn't be Black until it's time to be Black. Y'all know every lyric to the hottest rap songs, N-word this and N-word that, but when we getting slaughtered in the streets, where the f*** do y'all be at?
It would have been beneficial for Asians to pretend to be Black at that time, but there's no record of any of them doing it. China has 56 different ethnic groups, so don't think that they all look the same. If you live or travel China long enough, you will likely encounter people that make you think, hey, there's a Black person, only to get a little closer and realize they aren't. The Chinese Exclusion Act was finally repealed in 1943. But even though Chinese immigrants were allowed to enter the US again, they still faced the same discrimination and segregation laws as Black Americans. They couldn't enroll in schools with white children. They were mocked in books and newspapers, just like Black Americans were. White actors played exaggerated, offensive caricatures of Chinese people, just like they donned blackface to play Black characters. The similarities run deep. And the fact that so many of us don't know this history, that's by design. If you're wondering, why is this lady giving me a whole history lesson instead of just answering the question? Well, Maybe rewind the last 5 minutes. I had to lay all of that out so we could get here. I don't identify as African American because to me, African Americans are people who chose to immigrate to the US from an African country.
So I know that a lot of people don't have maps, and so this is Africa. And Africa is not a country, it's a continent made up of many countries. And these white lines represent borders. Australia, don't try to sniff them, okay? And this border wraps around a country called Nigeria. And I haven't been to Africa yet.
I have, but only to Ghana and a short layover in Ethiopia. I look forward to going back and visiting more countries. As I was saying, my definition of African Americans are people who grew up in African households and have a parent or grandparent who was born in an African country. It's just that those households happen to be in the United States. They still follow their native traditions and speak or understand at least their native languages. That's not my experience. I did go to a preschool that taught us Swahili, but I didn't grow up in a household that followed traditions of any African country. My family has been in the United States for 18 generations. If one generation is roughly 25 years, that means my lineage in this country goes back 450 years. I'm fortunate that my family has traced our genealogy long before Ancestry DNA kits existed. While it's impossible to know our family name or precisely which regions we came from, thanks to slavery, I know which countries make up my DNA. I also know that a small percentage of it is indigenous American. And of course, thanks to slavery, to me, Black American is a culture. Just like every country in the African diaspora has its own culture. Is there a lot of overlap? Absolutely. We all know that we originated on the same continent, but as we spread out, new cultures developed. Are Jamaicans and Haitians the same? French and Germans? Koreans and Chinese? South Africans and Nigerians? I'm actually the only person in my immediate family who's even been to the continent of Africa. Many people who are classified as African American have never been there, nor do they know which countries their ancestors came from. To me, these are Black Americans. And while some people here on Beyonce's internet like to argue that Black Americans have no culture, respectfully, I disagree. That's a topic for another day. Now, constantly explaining to Chinese people that I'm not African and having them respond with, but your family is from there, so you should be proud, gets frustrating because you never hear them tell a white American to be proud of their European ancestry. And many of them don't even have 200 years of lineage in this country. I am literally more American than the presidents of the United States of America. His paternal grandparents were born in Germany and his mom was born in Scotland. So yeah, a lot of us is way more American than him. And a whole lot of other white Americans too. Or orange ones. For the record, I am proud to be of African ancestry. I wouldn't want to be anything else. Period. Telling a Black American to be proud of being African is like telling an Indonesian to be proud of being Chinese. If you go back far enough, is there a link? Sure. But at this point, they have their own distinct identity, completely separate from Chinese. And another thing, white South Africans, or children of apartheid, don't get this treatment.
The original people of South Africa were not even Black people. I did some research, but yeah. Anyhow,
so they were white people?
Not really. They were, in my opinion, they looked very Black. But
they were African people, right?
The experts are saying that they are not Black people, indeed.
What do they mean by Black people? I don't understand.
Yeah, there's a tribe.
What does it mean to be Black?
The original.
Is it that they are Africans or they are not Africans?
Yeah.
Are they pale as you? Do they have blue eyes?
No.
Do they have blonde
look
hair?
More like you, honestly.
Is that so? They're Africans now. Yeah. Am I not African?
Yes, you can say that, of course. Yeah. But do you think that, like with South Africa, since let's say there are 10% white people there, population is growing, of course. People have children, etc., right? And maybe a lot of people move there as well.
Yeah.
Do you think that in a few hundred years, if the world is still stable and going on the way it does now, do you think it can start becoming like a 50-50 kind of thing?
We Africans, melanated people, we have a very dominant gene. So you can't whiten up South Africa. In the grand scheme of things, the so-called being white is going to fizzle out. Let me say in the next 200 years.
Okay.
There will be no more white people.
Online, in an attempt to be nice or inclusive, Chinese people will often say, "We don't care about your skin color, you're all just foreigners to us." Or, "We treat all foreigners the same." But as Nicole so perfectly explains...
So I've only been to China once, to the city of Beijing, and I can't lie, I had a decent time. Now, that was a shock compared to what I've heard about China. And remember all the videos of Black people getting asked for photos like they're a circus attraction? Some people like to act like the whole photo-taking thing isn't about racism. They're just curious. They don't see Black people often. Y'all, the internet and TV have been around for far too long. Use that same phone that you were going to use to take a picture and research what Black people look like. Some Black people get photographed and touched and they think it's a badge of honor, but why would the people of this country with a known history of anti-Blackness suddenly think you're so beautiful and great? And have you ever asked what they're even doing with these photos?
Yes, actually, I have asked them, what are you doing with these photos? And the answers vary. Most of the time, they're sending them to their friends to laugh at the Black that they saw on the train or in the park. This man genuinely, I think, was just showing this to his family who lives nearby. This was in my neighborhood at a neighborhood park. Still, the point remains.
I also know that people take photos of white people too, but context is key. White people, white skin, white features, those are universally praised. That's not the same for Black skin, Black features, or Black people. White people don't become president and then get compared to a monkey in a newspaper. One is admired and the other is mocked.
One is admired and one is mocked. And even when you say, "Oh, you are beautiful," in English, some of us understood what you really said in Chinese. How I respond or deal with racism and microaggressions, it changes based on the day. If I'm feeling good that day, maybe I ignore it. If it's a BCD, a bad China day, then I might say something. It just depends. Maybe it comes out in English, maybe it comes out in Chinese, or 不知道. I don't know. The camera didn't pick it up, but they were saying, "Oh my God, look at that foreigner. She's so huge." Then when she saw my butt, Miss Christian Dior went, "Oh yeah." So I was like, these lines between race, ethnicity, and nationality get blurry real fast. In 2023, I had this conversation with a Chinese recruiter who told me the city of Shenzhen, oh no, they don't hire African teachers. Mind you, this recruiter had only seen my photo. He didn't look at my CV. He didn't look at my passport. He didn't even watch my introduction video. He just saw my photo and said, "No Africans." Booyah, Feijoret. If I were a white South African, would that have been his reaction? No, because African is not what he meant. What he meant was Black. I know Zach meant no harm. He's just trying to make both of our lives easier in this job search. So he asked, "What do you prefer?" We prefer American because we're American. So he says, "So what? I should say they don't take Blacks?" And at this point, I'm like, I got it, get it, cool. What you said is fine. I was just truly surprised to hear that in 2023 after traveling and living in China for 5 whole years. And Zach says it will always be the same forever, even in 2023. And even though I did ultimately get a job offer at a school in Shenzhen, a lot of Chinese people feel like this because it's always been like this. So yes, some Chinese people do care about skin color and some do indeed treat us differently. This seems like a great time to talk about the lowest form of intelligence, even lower than racism, colorism. Although I don't subscribe to this, I don't identify as light skinned. I already told y'all I'm
black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black, and I'm black, y'all.
But I also don't pretend that caste systems don't exist in most melanated groups of people. Keeping this combo to apples and apples only, some Black Americans may not realize that outside of the US, whether you call yourself light skinned, dark skinned, or anything in between, when you step outside of these borders, generally all people see is black. They aren't saying, oh, well, this one is better because it's lighter. However, in a more myopic context, such as considering a Black person to date, marry, or employ, skin complexion often becomes more relevant. When I lived in Colombia, I once became friends with this girl from Spain. She thought I was a wonderful, beautiful person, and she asked if I had a brother because she was interested in dating someone related to me. I said, yeah. I showed her a picture, and the shock on her face when she saw the difference in complexion between me and him blew her mind. Yes, we have the same mom and dad. She was no longer interested. Some Chinese women go through great efforts to keep their skin closer to porcelain than their natural tan. I'll never forget my first day at my first job in China when I met a cute little 7-year-old girl who said, wow, the new teacher is beautiful, but she's been in the sun too long. In the middle of class, I've had students abruptly, innocently stop and shout, wow, teacher, your hand is so black. Your American values for skin tones are not the same abroad. There are places in the world where I am considered dark-skinned. In China, I was once told I am too light for a project because they wanted someone who was pure black. What the f does that even mean? Pure African people come in all shades too. It's not lost on me that sometimes I benefit from light skin privilege. I do what I can to either shut that down. Oh, you only date light skinned girls? Well, this isn't gonna work because I'm not light skinned and you're weird. Or I use this privilege to help someone who is darker than me because this whole concept is ridiculous. Seeing other people being discriminated against or being told that someone couldn't do something because of the color of their skin. I've had many recruiters deny my friends on the basis of their skin being too dark, just straight up saying the school thinks that this person is too dark. To keep it all the way POC though, the same thing happens to my American born and raised Asian friends. I've had many recruiters tell me, no, this person is too Asian. So even though some Chinese may say, you're all just foreigners to us, they definitely show preference in complexion sometimes. Now, I'm not going to give you a whole lesson on eugenics, but to put it simply, it is the belief that Black people, African people, or basically anyone who isn't white is intellectually inferior to white people. And this mindset, it still exists in many parts of the world today. Every time I come across it in modern day, I'm shocked. How do we live in a timeline where self-driving cars exist and people still think there's a link between IQ and skin color? How?
That was as good a time as any to remind the world when the NFL had to start paying out concussion-related damages to former players. They literally argued that Black players should get less money because they had less mental capacity to lose. The NFL had this policy in place up until 2021, after they were sued in a civil lawsuit. I need y'all to understand what this means, y'all. The NFL decided to give former players who were Black less money in concussion settlements because they believed that Black players or Black people in general started with lower cognitive function, meaning that their presupposition was that Black folks were inherently and genetically less intelligent than white folks.
Listen, no group is genetically smarter than another. I could make a case that if there were one, it's Nigerians. Because look how many world-renowned doctors, engineers, and scammers, genius-level scammers, have come out of Nigeria. Chinese and other Asians aren't naturally smart. They just study better.
Let me tell you a secret. Us Asian, we have to work hard too. Yeah, we didn't have math equation just coded in our brain. I know, unbelievable.
Some schools in China still refuse to hire Black teachers, not because of our qualifications, but because some parents assume we can't be qualified. They assume a Black teacher must speak poor English. It doesn't matter if you have a master's degree in education, a PhD in speech pathology. If your skin is darker than a paper bag, then there's a chance a Chinese parent might walk past your classroom and say, "为什么那个非洲人教英语?" Now, the good news is more and more people are unlearning these false narratives. More employers are evaluating candidates based on their experience and their credentials rather than their appearance. But you still need to understand that these outdated, discriminatory beliefs are still present. Let's get into some of the nice, socially acceptable answers to the question, how do Chinese people feel about Black people from Xiaohongshu? Long legs, run fast, and have a good figure. Strong sense of rhythm. Language ability is very strong. See, this is where things get blurry because I don't think people associate Black Americans with having strong language ability at all. I think that is a stereotype of Africans, which is true because most people in Africa, the entire continent, speak English, and they also speak a multitude of other languages. All of the African students that I met in China speak like 7 languages, and they do learn Mandarin extremely quickly. However, Black Americans do contribute significantly to the lexicon of the United States. A lot of you guys refer to things as just slang, but it's actually AAVE, African American Vernacular.
Vicious.
Sus.
AAVE, baby.
Honestly. FR. For real.
Black people.
That's it.
Period. Nope. Black women in the Black queer community.
Showing off.
Flexing.
That was us too.
Shocked.
Shook.
Aren't y'all tired of stealing?
Sprayed too much perfume. I mean, I too have been in elevators or cars with African men and felt like, why? Did you empty the whole bottle of cologne, fam? Why? Why do you think you need so much cologne? You don't. I don't think Black American men do that, but African men has super long legs. Once again, in the same screenshot, we can see 2 people talking about having long legs. And this was a comment I used to get all the time from my parents. If I sat on the floor with like my legs stretched out, they'd always be like, "Oh, this teacher has such long legs." Dark skin. Please stop it. Yes, please, let's stop. This went on and on. It's very similar comments. This one was very interesting though. So in response to how do Chinese people feel about Black people, this person says, the origin of humans possesses the richest genes. Hence, there are those who run exceptionally fast, jump exceptionally high, and sing exceptionally well. It is not impossible to think that Black people are the most intelligent and best looking as long as they receive a sufficiently good education and also grasp the discourse power of aesthetics. This is translated from Mandarin, but I mean, you get the gist. Wow. So, okay. Part of me is like, this is like reverse trolling, or like, let me just say something super positive, or it could be possibly this person actually believes that. If that's the case, that's really cool. In a different but similar sticky note post, a Black American says, I've had at least 5 people from China tell me that they don't like Black people. Is it true that China doesn't like Black Americans? There are like 1.4 billion people in China though, mate. China is a vast nation, just like America. Some people are racist and some people are not. There are about 300 million people on this app. Don't worry about 5. On the internet, we dislike everyone, including our own people, and often argue with each other. This is because we don't have a real sense that there are real people on the other end of the network. All we see are labels. If you come to China and walk around and take a look, you'll find that most people are friendly. Yeah, most Chinese people do not use their real pictures or real names or anything real online, ever. It'll be a picture of a cat, a meme, anything but their real selves. So that leads to them disassociating whatever is being said or presented on their screen as human, as a real thing, as real feelings. Historically, Chinese social media has always been littered with racist videos, especially content that mocks Black people or portrays them through offensive racial stereotypes, which is interesting considering everything I told you earlier in this video. They don't just do it to Black people though. Japanese people can get it, Indian people can get it, anybody who's not Chinese can get it. Let's get into some comments about Black people posted on a platform in China in which maybe they thought non-Chinese people wouldn't see. The first one, this is typed in English, Black dog. The rest of these have been translated from Mandarin to Chinglish because this is WeChat translation. WeChat translation kind of sucks. It's very helpful. I'm so glad it exists. It did not exist when I first moved there. It came shortly after. Very helpful. But the translations often use the wrong synonym, so you kind of have to re-decipher what the translation means. Even though it's in English, it may not make sense. Okay, so the younger generation must be sober. I really don't know. I don't know what they meant to say there. I don't know how to retranslate that for you. Preventing the desecration of China, protecting our country, and fighting the evil spirit is urgently needed. Basically, this is saying be careful of non-Chinese people, especially the Black ones, because they're evil, roughly, okay? Rough translation. Expulsion from China. Do Chinese students also have such a reputation in foreign countries? The next one says, send it home. Don't give this kind of person any chance to take roots. Being that I don't remember what this video was, it is possible that the Black person in the video was doing something that Chinese people found disrespectful. It's possible. I don't know. These are just the comments that are left under it, okay? Maybe this isn't the best example because I don't know what that video is. You are not welcome in China. Get out of China. What is this? Thumbs down, middle finger, devil face. Okay, this one. All right, now this one is just a guy working out in the gym. That's all he's doing. The first comment that's slightly cut off is a very common comment that we've seen on Xiaohongshu quite often. If you are active in China, if you are good in China, if you are working, if you're contributing to society in China, study hard and follow the rules, we welcome you. But if you want to get into trouble, we will stay with you, is what the translation says. But if you want to get into trouble, you can get out. Black tadpoles. As long as there are no Black dogs in the world, there won't be this little farm tool. Please get out of the earth or go back to the United States and buy it for 0 yuan and be shot dead by the police. Damn scum. Not sure if this Black person is Black American or what. I have no idea. All we can see is they're very fit back. Go back to America and get shot. Black knee armor fitted. Don't know what that means. Is this Lao Guang? Don't know what that means. Please go back to your own country. Please go back to your own country. Please go back to Africa. Please go back to America. If you do anything remotely deemed yucky to Chinese people, that's the first thing they say. Get out of China. We are yellow-skinned, black-haired Chinese. It's different from these. No fish to us in China. Terrible translations. I don't know what that was supposed to mean. Empty the folder. This one means empty the clip. I hope I don't need to translate that any further for you. Mobile troops have reached the battlefield. Since 1956, Africa has received $4.4 trillion. Where it says NIGE, add one more G and an R. Okay, that's what they wrote. What I will shoot. I received a notification from my superior, allow us to use lethal weapons, destroy chocolates. I hope I don't need to translate that either. It's giving intimidated. Some Chinese men feel threatened by the presence of big, strong Black men being in their country. Next one, his name on here in English. This part is in English. It's not translated. The name. I'm not going to say it. You can read it. When will you return home to build your homeland with the shady? There is Chinese characters for the N-word. Again. Okay, now this video, this person in the video is half Black, half Chinese. Not sure which parents. He says, I'm a native of Nanjing. Anytime there are mixed race people on the internet in China, there will always be very hateful, discriminatory, sad comments under the post. Here I see the N-word in Chinese. I see, come on, grab this black farmer's tool and pick the old man's cotton. Okay, this is a bad translation. A woman who marries a daughter goes to a country, and a man who marries a husband from a nation goes to one country, you know? Take responsibility for what you choose and don't let others take responsibility for your actions. When you have an international, interracial union, take care of your responsibilities. I'm guessing the boy's mother is native to Nanjing. He was raised in Nanjing. Don't know where the boy's father is, maybe. So they're trying to say, like, don't come over here and make babies and leave them. What happened and why are there Negro here? Mixed race, not pure blood. Honestly, those were like the very tame versions of what goes on sometimes under posts like this. I don't think that I could share the rest of them on YouTube without this video being demonetized. So I'm not going to do that. But you can imagine, like I said at the beginning of this video, people have different beliefs. It is what it is. It's just like the internet anywhere else. People say crazy stuff online all the time. They would never say those things to your face. Well, maybe I should say they would rarely say those things to your face. And if they did, they would say it in Chinese and hope that you ting bu dong. I've had some jarring experiences as a Black woman living in China. The staring, the photo taking, the mocking, even being touched without my consent. But the worst one, I've never shared this publicly before. One night, as I was leaving a nightclub, a club that I frequented often, someone smacked my butt hard. I mean, a full-on wind up, like it had to come like this. Of course, I turned around furious and saw 3 Chinese men staring back at me. 2 of them looked terrified, but one, the tallest one, the one who was standing closest to me, had this look on his face that read, "I dare you to do something." And in that moment, I knew the security cameras probably didn't catch it because his 2 friends had blocked the view. I knew none of my friends saw it because they were ahead of me. I knew if I reacted, I could end up in a Wendell Brown situation.
Finally, after all these years of pain and suffering, I finally get to celebrate with my family. I'm home. I'm back on American soil. I've been waiting on this moment for years. I've dreamed of this moment, and it's finally here. It's finally here, and I'm so thankful.
I knew it was a lose-lose scenario, and he knew it too. So I just turned around, walked out, got in a taxi, and went home like nothing happened. But even after that, the positive experiences I had in China far outweighed the negative ones. And yes, if the right opportunity came along, I would gladly move back. At the same time, I completely understand every Black person who says they will never visit or live in China again.
Y'all can have China. I'm over the coughing and spitting and staring and asking me for a pic to show they friends the Black they saw walking around.
There are some cities where it feels like your very presence is a problem. But the same thing could be said for cities all over the world. With the current state of the US, more and more people are looking for a way out. For Black people, though, there's another layer we have to consider. How will we be perceived and treated based on our skin color? For me personally, I don't care what some random stranger believes about Black people. I don't move through the world allowing others to dictate what's for me and what isn't. I lead with love, qualifications, and good intentions. And while there will always be a time or two where that doesn't matter, it's never going to change who I am. How was I treated as a Black woman has always been a difficult question for me to answer, regardless of which country we're speaking about, because as you can see, it's complicated. But to sum it up for the first time ever, get ready, clip this up, all right? Considering everything I've shared in this video, this was my experience as a Black woman living in China. I was treated as a respected professional who sometimes had to prove why I deserved that respect. Most Chinese people are genuinely kind. Once they see that you're established, that you're contributing to society, many are very friendly. some are wary of any foreigner. And yes, some are especially wary of Black foreigners until another Chinese person vouches for you. Yes, I had a few incidents that were undeniably racially motivated, such as being called a dirty African by someone who assumed I didn't understand. But I also had moments of discrimination that had nothing to do with race and everything to do with just being foreign. The same things would have happened to a white foreigner, a blue, a green one, or anyone who isn't Chinese. If I fixated on every negative experience I've had in every country I've lived in or visited, I think I'd probably come to the conclusion that there's nowhere comfortable to be a Black American woman. But why focus on the handful of bad experiences when I have a much longer list of good ones? I lived in China for roughly 1,900 days, and on most of them, I was treated just like any other local. And isn't that what we all want as expats and immigrants?
At the end of the day, everybody's going to always look through the scope of their own limited experience. I cannot see myself and form my identity based off of the limited experiences that you have and see. Even the opinions that you form with the the minuscule details that you have, it does not define me as a person. And it will go awry if I start to be who I'm not supposed to be because I'm so interested in showing you that I'm not who you think I am. Your misrepresentation of me does not define me, does not fulfill my purpose. It will not shape the path before me.
Black, thank God I'm black. I won't take it back. Ha! I'm proud to be black. Dipped in gold, black. Kissed by the sun, black. Melanin field, black. The chosen one, black. I'll fix your crown, black. You were born to lead, black. Make us proud, black. 'Cause you're royalty, black. Thank God I'm black. I won't take it back. I'm proud to be black.